Hello and welcome back to TeaBookClub. TeaBookClub is a monthly book club where we read a book a month and we meet online from around the world at the end of each month to discuss the book and share our thoughts. You can find a link and more information about this below. So today is actually our meetup day for our January book club, which was The Social History of Tea by Jane Pettigrew and Bruce Richardson. So I'm looking forward to discussing that with the group later on at our meetup. What I thought I'd do today was, instead of reading from January's book, since we're technically finished it, I'm going to read from February's book. So this is the new book that we're going to do for February, which I'm really looking forward to. It's been on my book list for a while and appeared under the Christmas tree this year, at Christmas. So I'm really excited to get stuck in. It is The Story of Japanese Tea by Tyas Sōsen. So Tyas is a Belgian gentleman living in Japan, very knowledgeable about tea and sells tea from Japan as well. What I'm going to do is I was just tucking into this morning and deciding what to read, and I thought, since this is the first of a new book, I'm going to make it a slightly longer episode, so I'll just read for maybe 10-15 minutes, see how we go. And I'm going, because I really want you to get an idea, because the introduction is brilliant and I think brings up a lot of points and will really get you an idea of what the book is about, and hopefully get you buying the book, reading it, and feeling inclined to come along to book club at the end of the month and join us in discussing it. There is going to be so much from this book to talk about. I just know it. It's brilliant. I've been recommended it, but I can also just tell just by dipping in at the beginning that it's going to be really good. So, on to the reading. So I'm jumping in at the beginning with the introduction. We'll leave the preface, but I think the introduction is a really good place to start. Tea produced in Japan, even today, remains a product that is mainly consumed within Japan. But a phrase often voiced by members of the industry indicates that the national rates of consumption are at a decline. The presence of a teapot in common households is disappearing, and most contemporary families no longer have one at home. Tea is no longer the national beverage that it used to be 100 or even 50 years ago. More carbonated drinks, coffee, and other foreign beverages have been introduced in recent years, and have largely diversified the range of what the average Japanese person drinks. Consequently, the consumption of tea has declined in favour of a more varied menu to quench the thirst, as well as the easy availability, inexpensiveness, and exoticness of other drinks. Thus, rightfully, the tea industry must, and has done so frantically in the last decennia, root out the problem to put forward a solution to continue to bring the product to the consumer. In doing so, two approaches to the problem have been proposed, each with their own suggested attempts at resolving the decline. The first approach is founded in the viewpoint that Japanese tea, as it was in the past, has come to the end of its career and ultimately has lost its appeal to the consumer. This belief supports the idea that the old image of tea must be done away with to make room for something brilliantly new. Some of the results of this approach can be seen in canned or bottled tea of the kind that is widely available from vending machines throughout the country, tea ice cream and tea and sweets and cooking, to name a few. The second approach is the belief that the consumer is at fault. The consumer has forgotten the value of tea and needs to be re-educated. The Nihon Cha Instructor Association is the leading organisation in providing the solution to this problem. The association provides thoroughgoing course materials and hosts examinations for common people to not only educate them, but also to engage them in further spreading the message about how tea should be understood, brewed and savoured. These educated instructors are provided with consolidated information in order to concretely and concisely be able to tell their peers or neighbours, or if they are active missionaries of the association, their students, what, with the removal of any doubt or contradiction, Japanese tea is, why it is good for you, and how it should be brewed to obtain a delicious cup. Although the above attempts have been made in the best of intentions, I strongly feel that there is something gravely wrong with both approaches. Whether it is the product that has become old and needs to be renewed, or the consumer who has forgotten the value of tea and must be re-educated, both are ultimately external factors that seemingly need to be straightened out before the industry will ever be able to sell tea again. This is a common stance we as human beings take to our problems. The fault lies with another and must be rectified before we will be able to do what we need to do. If the external factors don't change, then we can't do what we are supposed to do. This approach victimizes the industry by saying that it isn't their fault and that others are responsible for their failing. Looking at each approach individually, the first seeks to boldly terminate and disregard the manufacturing of tea to produce something else with the same raw material. This approach aids with the sustenance of tea farmers but gets nowhere near solving the issue at hand. The second approach is ultimately an intellectual approach, defining tea as what it is, as opposed to what it isn't, depriving the product of its natural variety and vitality. We see the failing of this approach in the vicious circle that demands cultivar development and nitrogen fertilization to obtain a unified taste, resulting in excessive use of pesticides and related chemicals. The rigid categorization of tea has set standards for what tea must be, rather than to objectively look at what tea is, forcing manufacturers to meet those standards. I believe that there is a third way to view this issue, and it requires us to look beyond the fault of the product and the consumer. Why has tea become less popular? And why is the consumer, even after the efforts to create new products and education, still distancing himself from tea? My perception is that the industry itself is just as greatly at fault as the product and the consumer. When the intentions of the industry start to waver in fear of its possible downfall, then consumption began to decline. This confusion became prominent to the consumer as the industry began the search for alternative products to balance the scales. In short, tea became something else, something of which the industry wasn't even certain what it was supposed to be. Concretely, what does this mean? For the sake of educational purposes, tea has become standardized and unified as a flavor. As a result, while some are in favor of consistency, the appeal of the tea's natural diversity and variety has been nullified. In addition, the focus on umami flavor in Japanese tea has aided in unifying flavor, yet it has also called many unnatural approaches to cultivation into life. The goal of the industry is to be able to control the outcome of the product for the sake of mass consumption, but it is inevitably an approach that goes against the essential nature of the product and simultaneously at the cost of quality. The problem that I see is not that the consumer or the product itself, or the industry for that matter, is at fault, but that the way in which the product is produced in general requires readjustment. What is perceived and introduced globally as Japanese tea is merely the image of what the industry wants the product to be. But is that genuinely what tea is? Unification of taste is but an illusion. No fertilizer or additive or cultivar will produce the same taste each year, and no blending practices can be put in place to cover up the differences that do arise, but each batch or harvest do arise with each batch or harvest. It is through trying to create something that isn't that the true appeal of the product remains obscured. I believe that the issue and the solution to understanding tea lies in awareness. By this I mean the grounded, down-to-earth realization that tea is a plant, susceptible to its environment and climate and the ever-changing nature of nature itself. Tea can only be seen if we see it for its diversity and see it as the unique being it is, as opposed to what we want it to be. From this viewpoint, it becomes possible to approach manufacturing too, from the stance that what can we bring out in this harvest, rather than the deceiving approach, what can we add to it, or what can we make it into. And it is exactly this that I wish to achieve with this book, to bring awareness to the true nature of tea. The main goal of the story of Japanese tea, this book, is to indicate that tea is to be savoured, enjoyed and appreciated for its unique individuality and diversity, and that the manufacturing doesn't rely on set practices, but that each tea is produced in its own unique way. This is what the true pleasure of tea is, and what allows us a much deeper insight into its cultural heritage and the appeal it carries within. This approach is to have empathy for the being of tea, and to attempt to understand its background in order to see why it produces a certain flavour or aroma, or what has brought about its colour. It is to see tea prior to human intervention, and to savour it as such. This is what I perceive as the liquid jade that was drunk by the sages, which empowered them to associate with the mortal spirits. And no artificial additive will enhance this trait, for it is purity and clarity alone that give life to true understanding and wisdom. The material for this book has accumulated over 12 years of active practice in Japan's rite of tea, of which the author has received full instructorship, 2 years of full-time employment as a traditional tea vendor in the heart of Uji, during which he studied for and passed the examination of the Nihon Cha Instructor Association and received certification as accredited instructor, regular meetings with and tea farm visits at the properties of skilled artisan tea manufacturers, encounters that have provided much insight in subjects as the struggles of tea farmers, the reality behind the manufacturing of tea, and the workings of the industry as a whole. In addition, for the past 4 years, the author has devoted his life to discovering the essence of tea through curating a special selection of tea, repeatedly talking to and interviewing tea manufacturers, gathering insider information about the industry, etc., in order to truthfully and openly make this information available internationally. The discoveries made and the information gathered during such interactions is what constitutes the foundation for the material presented in this book, and it is with the wish to objectively portray what Japanese tea at its core and in essence is that this book has been brought to life. I shall carry on. An initial alignment. Japanese tea is often defined as green tea and limited to some of the major brands of tea that were fashioned in Japan, including sencha, kabusecha, gyokuro, matcha, bancha, etc. And while it is unique to Japan's manufacturing methods to steam the freshly picked tea leaf as the first stage of manufacturing for the production of green tea, I believe that putting too much focus on this trait obscures the existence of other equally unique yet differently produced Japanese teas. Therefore, I have chosen to take the definition of this term as broad as possible, focusing on all tea manufactured in Japan, thereby honouring all products of the same tea bush that have been so meticulously crafted by the most skilled tea producers in this country. Throughout this book, tea means the following. 1. Tea, the beverage, made by infusing dried and crushed tea leaves, or by mixing pulverized tea leaf in hot water, consuming the leaf in its entirety. 2. The tea leaf obtained from the Camellia sinensis, an evergreen shrub also known as the tea plant, of which the youngest buds and leaves are plucked and then heated and rolled, crushed to dry. 3. The act of brewing, serving, or consuming tea. To do tea, which is in extended meaning, is also used to refer to the rite of tea. In addition, Japanese tea as the general term used to refer to tea produced in Japan. In the broad meaning of the term, this concerns all sorts of tea, as defined above, which were produced on Japanese soil, putting them at distance of the variations of tea that were produced outside of Japan in China, India, or elsewhere, but being inclusive of all tea manufacturing in this country. Before we dig deeper into the various aspects of how a tea comes to life, let's first take a closer look at some of the more common variations of Japanese tea and how they relate to each other. And once we have that framework in place, we can begin our discovery of the complex nature of tea. The chart and individual explanations below should function as a frame of reference to conceptualize the notion of Japanese tea, but it shouldn't by any means be understood as the only true definition of it. There are various ways of grouping tea together in boxes of similar kind, and while it is easier for us to understand the matter when everything is tidily categorized, when we cling on too long to such conceptualizations, it will in the long run only deviate us away from the actual truth of what it is we speak. The chart presented below can help you now, but should be discarded when you are done with this book. In essence, tea is only what its environment and the processes it has gone through make it. The true subtlety of the product cannot be understood in categories, but should be apprehended for each product individually and ultimately as each individual cup of tea you savour. The intention of this book is exactly this, to provide you with the background, information and understanding so that you can see tea for what it is. Seeing with your own eyes based on the knowledge and feeling you have of the product and not on what the package or common understanding of Japanese tea tells you about what the product was made to resemble. If you are applying the understanding presented in this book and train yourself to with each cup seek for the underlying factors that have brought that tea into existence, you will receive much more information from the tea itself than what anyone will ever be able to tell you about it. The tea tells its own story, and it is our duty to listen to what it has to say. And to do so, we must cultivate the ears to listen. We must become able to understand its language. We must see that the cup before us is in fact the universe itself. To illustrate my meaning, I'd like to quote the 18th century Zen priest and poet, tea peddler Baisao, saying, "Don't spoil the reality by prattling about tea." When a young man commissioned Baisao to write a calligraphy of the three largest Chinese characters meaning, "Have a cup of tea," he responded, "In your own interest, I have inscribed instead these 2 lines to caution you against superficial attachments. Attaching fruitlessly to words about tea will get you nowhere. You can't expect to understand it emulating a parrot's tricks." What follows on the next page is the chart that Tyas is talking about, which is fascinating and a great way of looking and breaking down tea. So I highly recommend having a good look at that in the book. Let's see how we're doing time-wise. We've done 14 minutes already. Wow. I think I am just going to read the next few pages because he just breaks down different categories of tea, and I think this is great just again for getting an idea of what this book is about and the different things that we're going to discover as we read it. So I'm on page 8 now. Green tea. Green tea, or Rokucha, is the largest group of 3 major categories. This is because Japan's tea manufacturing is and has mostly been centered on the production of green tea. Nevertheless, although this category may appear large, including a wide variety of products, in fact the later classes are derivations of only the top 2 groups on the chart. Green tea is manufactured through either steaming or pan-frying the freshly obtained tea leaf. What then differentiates the teas included in these groups is the way they are cultivated and whether or not and for how long the bushes have been shaded. The later cases are either a reprocessing of the same product, a recycling of waste obtained during the manufacturing of the 2 major groups, or a variation on the whole. Nevertheless, the discrimination on what is major and what is minor depends only on which products are consumed most and are being produced in greatest number. Sencha. Sencha is conventionally grown without shades, but recently manufacturers have begun to apply shading practices for sencha as well in order to enhance the product's umami flavour. Therefore, the distinction between roadside unshaded sencha, roji sencha, and shaded sencha, kabuse sencha, is made. Cultivating the bushes under the bright sky enables sunlight to cause photosynthesis to occur within the leaf, producing more catechin and thus rendering the tea leaf bitter with a clear finish. Harvest is commonly conducted with mechanized equipment. Processing involves the steaming process, resulting in a varying product in accordance with the length of the steaming period employed. Several rolling and kneading stages produce a long, thin, needle-shaped final product. Kabusecha. Minimal shading during the tea bushes cultivation restricts the amount of photosynthesis that can occur with kabusecha, thereby maintaining a sweeter flavour. Direct application of the shades on top of the bushes imbues the final product with a unique blanketing aura. Kabuse-ka, reminiscent of sweet humid earth. Harvest and manufacturing is similar to the processes employed for sencha. Gyokuro. Gyokuro is also shaded to enhance the tea's sweetness, but for a longer period than kabusecha. Since in most cases the bushes are not blanketed immediately but covered with shades that are expanded on a canopy-like structure. This shading method imbues the tea with strong sweetness and umami flavour, in addition to a shading aura, o oika, suggestive of dried nori seaweed. Harvest is often conducted by hand to ensure only the softest leaf is obtained, safeguarding an even stronger umami flavour. Manufacturing is similar to sencha and kabusecha. Tencha. Tea leaf for the manufacturing of tencha is obtained in a similar way to the methods employed for the cultivation of gyokuro. Manual harvest is common for average to high quality products. The tea leaf is steamed but not rolled. It is dried in an oven and filtered in preparation for grinding the tencha leaf into matcha powder. Before grinding, the tencha leaf is blended and branded by the wholesale manufacturer, and through grinding it receives an additionally enhanced aroma from the heat of the mortar. Kamairicha. Tea leaf for kamairicha is cultivated in the same way as roadside sencha, receiving abundant sunlight. Harvest is commonly done by machine. The raw tea leaf upon harvest is not steamed but parched in a frying pan, imbuing the tea with a distinct cauldron aura, kamaka. Processing and drying is done through rolling and kneading, but the leaf is not shaped to sencha, maintaining a curly, comma-like magatama jo appearance. Fermented tea. Semi-fermented tea, bihakocha, goes hand in hand with the following group: fermented tea, hakocha. The difference is the amount of withering and oxidation or fermentation the teas classified have endured. Among semi-fermented teas produced in Japan are, although in small numbers, oolong and white tea listed. In difference to the methods used to process green tea, these types are not steamed when the tea leaf needs to be fixed, but are commonly heated in a frying pan, in similarity to kamairicha and Chinese-Taiwanese processing methods. Oolong tea. Tea bushes for oolong tea are cultivated in the same way as for kamairicha and sencha, but harvest is often later since a larger, coarser leaf is considered suitable for its manufacturing. Withering initiates the extraction of an oolong tea's delightful floral aura, hanaka, also referred to as withering aura, ichooka. Black tea. No particular treatment is needed for the cultivation and harvesting of tea leaf for black tea. This is done in the same way as all non-shaded teas indicated above. Through withering and through thorough fermentation as a result of oxidization, the black tea receives its distinct crimson hue and deep fragrant balm. Now that the initial framework is in place and we have a basic idea of what we're looking at, let's begin the story of Japanese tea. This story, as you'll find throughout the book, is one free from preconception and absolutely without the desired intention to define and box tea up. Rather, it is a path to discovery of what tea as a raw natural organism is by looking at it from all different angles, grasping its meaning in its entirety. In this book, I talk about cultivation practices, manufacturing methods, history, different types of tea, accounts of experiences from manufacturers, case studies, and much more. I do this not with the intention to point to one correct way, but instead to provide as much information possible in order for you to be able to cultivate the understanding that will allow you to see tea for what it is, as opposed to what others tell you that it is supposed to be. So, rather longer reading than normal, and next week I will go back to our normal 5-minute reading, but I just wanted to read that because I thought the introduction and the categorizations were so good and such a good way of getting into the book and opening us up to what I think is going to be a really exciting journey, learning about Japanese tea in a different way. So I hope you'll join us and check the link below so that you can sign up to TeaBookClub and join our conversation at the end of the month. Thank you.